The film Monty Python and the Holy Grail made a lot of money for me, and for me it was a lot. Unfortunately, the tax people demanded 83% of this, but having a little left, I decided to invest it in something I knew about. Some years before, Bernard McKenna had written a half-hour TV play for Ronnie Barker called The Odd Job. I liked this and thought that it would form the basis for a very funny film. The idea being that a man who had found himself incapable of committing suicide hires an odd job man to do the job for him. Knowing his own weakness, he tells the man not to take any notice should he appear to change his mind or make any attempt to preserve his life. Just bump him off. The odd job man leaves. The central character's reasons for wanting to commit suicide then disappear, with the reappearance of a forgiving wife. But now there is a man out there with a contract on him, whom he has no way of contacting, and who will take no notice of him even if he did. Keith, I thought, would make an excellent odd job man. I commissioned a script from Bernard, and the process of film production began. Eventually, I had a script that I was happy with. Keith and I were to play the leads, and I found sufficient financial backing, about £500,000. The production was on. Now, Keith had a problem with alcohol, just as I had. Indeed, I first began to realise how ill I was becoming, having sat next to Keith's bedside on the occasions when he was suffering, and I mean suffering, from withdrawal symptoms. He had hallucinated that he was losing weight to the extent that he would shortly no longer exist, and had to keep weighing himself for reassurance. He also thought the SAS were after him, and had tied him to the bed for one entire night, with wire electrodes either side of his testicles, so that if he shook or moved at all, the shock would be very nasty indeed. It's difficult to remain motionless when you have DTs. This was an horrific experience for him. 2 weeks away from shooting, Keith was in hospital drying out to get fit, ready for the filming. Unfortunately, the director I'd engaged, Cliff Owen, had broken his thigh a week earlier, and we now had a new director, Peter Medak. Feeling lucky to find a director who would be willing to take on the task at such short notice, I took Peter to see Keith in hospital, where we did a little read-through of a couple of scenes. We left the hospital. Peter Medak became convinced that my best friend was not the right person for the job. I felt he was wrong, but there was little I could do about it. My executive producers, they provided a lot of the actual cash, preferred to take Peter's judgment on this issue, despite vigorous protestation from me, directly to Peter's main ally in this, a chap called Steve O'Rourke, manager of the Pink Floyd, to whom I said that I had only begun to be interested in this project from the start because this was exactly the right role for Keith, and that without him the film would just become another British B-feature or worse. Short of cancelling filming altogether, there was nothing I could do. My producers, executive producers, and even author Bernard were all expressing doubts as to Keith's ability. In part they were worried, I suppose, about his drinking, but damn it, they were wrong. I knew the two of us could see it through. By this time, I'd been off alcohol for 3 months. I had a sleepless night. I knew how much Keith was looking forward to the part in the film. I knew that I was right, and they were wrong. But should I just wave goodbye to £50,000 I'd already spent on making the film, or take a chance on it making money? I chose the latter, and still wish I hadn't. Keith was very understanding about it, but I knew how much it must have hurt him. At the same time, EMI had just backed out of their deal with Python about providing $4 million for the Life of Brian production. Lord Delfont himself gave us the chop, above the heads of the chief of EMI production, who had agreed the terms. Keith set about vigorously trying to raise the money for us to save this venture, and would have succeeded in time, but George Harrison made an extremely courageous offer, which was eagerly accepted by us, and the film was on again. Keith was going to play the part of one of the Blood and Thunder prophets in that, and when I met him a week before we went to start shooting in Tunisia, he seemed to be looking forward to it all very much. He was still not drinking, and had, it seemed, beaten the bottle. But on September the 7th, 1978, he died, having drunk a quantity of wine, some brandy, and taken some heminevrin pills, a drug sometimes used to avert the foulest horrors of alcohol withdrawal. A combination which was deadly. I didn't know how to react. The loss was too appalling to comprehend, but it left me determined to make sure that his spirit, his vision of right and wrong, his energy, would not die with him. Keith was kindness itself, and never harmed anyone in his escapades, which certainly brightened up many lives, just because there was someone around who was reckless enough to say, "Stuff the lot of you," and drive his Rolls-Royce into a swimming pool, or blow the door off a hotel bedroom with dynamite because a pompous hotel manager complained about his cassette recorder making a noise in the lobby. The amazed manager, staring at the smoking doorway as Keith pointed at his cassette still playing, was told, "That is noise, mate. This is The Who." Keith is one person I know I'll see again. Now, as luck and Captain W.E. Johns would have it, everything went Air Force blue with flashes of gold. We hurtled towards the safe pericentre of the black hole of Orion, employing occasional plasma ramjet thrusts to avoid a clutch of indescribable singularities, arriving light years away, but simultaneously in Los Angeles 2 years later. I had slipped into a state of inertia. All further activity seemed pointless. I had fallen foul of one of my own footnotes. For months now I'd been suffering from this ill-defined mental malaise. Nothing seemed real anymore. Was this just the effect of living in Los Angeles, in which case I should leave immediately, or was there some deeper psychopathology? I called Dr. Wanacross to examine me. As we sipped our apricot Shastas, we chatted amiably about how it was now 2 years since our encounter in Chapter 0. He was pleased that I had successfully kicked the habit of 23/37ths of a lifetime, but again gave analytical flummery the elbow and said, "Do you realize that in the 10 minutes I've been here you've dropped 17 famous names?" "Have I?" said. "I didn't intend to. It's just that I happen to know these people. They're friends of mine. They live here." "I want you to repeat what you just said to yourself and think about it as a medical man." "You mean I've got—" My head reeled as the grim reality struck me like a blow on the head from a copy of Cecil and Loeb. "Yes, Nivenism," he said. "It's a common enough complication of angelitis, a similar disease to that described by Freud as the Frank Harris syndrome, an endemic autobiographical complaint." "What should I do, move to Finland?" "No, you must face the problem. There is no known treatment. You'll just have to sweat it out." "Isn't there anything I can do to speed up my recovery?" "There is, but it isn't going to be pleasant, I'm afraid. Revulsion therapy. I'm going to prescribe to you an intensive course of Hollywood parties. It's your only hope."